I'm Rick from Cartridge Classic Cars. On this video, we're back on this 1970 Monte Carlo. We did a lot of work off camera, and if you follow our Facebook page, Cartridge Classic Cars, you could see we have been posting and doing forward progress work on this Monte Carlo. We're not filming everything on the car just because it's a lot of minor just patching work here or there and a lot of custom stuff, and it might not directly relate to your project. I mean, we'll do a quick recap real quick on everything we've done, but on previous videos you saw we did test fit the front sheet metal. We've done floor patching in this car, and the rear sheet metal already has been test fit one time. Since then, we have pulled the rear sheet metal off. The owner wanted lizard skin on the quarter panel, so we did strip down to bare metal. We have lizard skinned them, and they are ready to install for the final time. We also did weld in the wheelhouses already. We have stripped them down, and with the weld through primer that was on them, we did DA sand all that down, and we did coat everything back here in epoxy primer. Also, before we did the epoxy primer, we did build a tail panel for this car. So what happened with this car, it was hit in the rear end. The owner had this car, since the 90s. We've said it on the intro of the video, and he said that, I believe it was, he backed into it or a truck went forward a little bit. Basically, right here was hit on this car and the tail panel was rolled down. Now, saying that, everything was rolled so hard, it was a push on it, and everything we were doing on this car, we weren't able to really pull it back out to our liking, but it didn't really affect anything. The only thing it did affect, we had a large trunk gap along the top of this area. So instead of really trying to cut relief everything else and trying to keep rolling it when everything test fit on the rear, light fixture extensions back here and the bumper, everything else looked good, just the trunk gap. We decided to cut out the center tail panel here. It was also dented around this area, and we just made a brand new tail panel, which was a little bit taller, pushing this area up. And I did it with the rear sheet metal test fit on the car with the trunk on it and everything. We got everything where the owner likes it. We did have to open up the gap a little bit more because there is a trim piece down here. But in general, like I said, I think that's a good, we were able to weld everything on. We TIG welded it. That's a good now start to getting everything on the final fitment even closer. Because like I said, we were fighting that for quite a while, and I don't think with the damage on the car, and it was good to know what happened with the car so we know that, nothing was wrong with our test fitting on our sheet metal. We are gonna really work on these corners quite a bit, just because we want to get the profile on them really nice with the end caps, the extension pieces on this Monte Carlo. So before our final welding, you will see we will try to use the porta power and really focus on dialing those in. We are not going to gap anything. There will be some gapping issues based on the doors and the quarter panels. If you watch other videos of mine, we will address those gaps down the road after the car pretty much gets removed from the frame jig, or like I said with this one, we'll probably cut the front supports and the rear supports, let the car just free stand on itself, and then address the gap and issues. Like I said, we did put the wheelhouses in epoxy primer. We did spray two coats of epoxy primer in the trunk and the tail panel area now that the wheelhouses have been welded up. I also did weld the seam of the wheelhouses all the way down. I did that through the front. I do that on most of the projects. I just feel it makes the project a lot stronger and less chances of corrosion down the road. Once you add a little bit of seam seal, you're never going to know. I do check with the owners on these builds unless I know it's a full, unless it's Pro Tour and we know that's pretty, we're going to assume that that's okay. But saying that, those are little touches we do. I did not weld the trunk hinges to the wheelhouses yet. You could see we left the weld through primer on that area. We will install the trunk springs on this thing before we do the rear trunk. We'll actually install the trunk latch and everything and make sure this car closes. I don't believe I have the rear weather stripping for this car, so we'll add a couple spacers in here here, get everything gapped out properly. We also have trunk gutters to install. We have the deck filler to install. All these panels also have been sandblasted and coated in epoxy primer on the insides of them, so we know when we come back through the final installation that everything is not going to be rusting from the inside out. Like I said, you'll see on the outside of these panels, this is a perfect example. These are new old stock quarter panels. They were only in that E-coat status, and you can really see the rust array forming over the decades of these panels being stored inside. So this is my belief that we strip the E-coat down, there's less chance of a failure. We're down to bare metal on everything in the car that's been sandblasted completely, hand stripped, whatever it was, and we add our epoxy primer, which is going to be our protection for, you know, anything from rusting and water on it. So let's get to this work. What we're going to do on this video, we are going to show some of the wheelhouse installation. So we'll go back in time, we'll show that, we did film that, and then we also did film the trunk drop-off extension installation. So some of that will come up to where the car is right now, and then we'll start putting the deck filler, the quarter panels, the trunk, everything on, and start welding that. This video on the work-wise will be a little bit shorter, but you'll get the idea on how the car goes together. We'll do a walk around at the end of the video showing everything we've done on this video, and we'll explain where we're going to go on the next video from there. So stay tuned. Let's get working on this Monte Carlo.
The first step, what we're going to end up doing is we are going to weld the wheelhouses on the Monte Carlo. You could see at this point we're going back in time, like I said, and the quarter panels are still sitting on the car. They're fit up with the doors and the whole trunks on the car. All the sheet metal is fit really well. Once I'm confident that I'm happy with everything else with the gapping, and we know we don't have to clock the wheelhouses or move anything, then I can go ahead and fully weld them in. I usually start with the lip underneath around the trunk pan. You could see we got the spot welder in there. There was a couple areas with the frame being away that we just drilled a couple MIG rosette holes and then we welded them through. Once I'm done with that, I already told you at the walk around intro of the video what we're doing right now is we're going to go ahead and weld up the complete seam of these wheelhouses. This is area that usually seam sealer is completely packed in here. So what I'll end up doing, I'll sit there, run the MIG bead right down it that will fill up and stop any water from coming from the inside underneath the car into this area. I feel like a lot of times that with the seam sealer, and I know the factory puts seam sealer over bare metal anyway, but the moisture comes through and it gets trapped almost behind the seam sealer, and then that's where these areas start rusting. And this car seemed like it was one of the ones that the same thing happened, that the whole area, if you watch previous videos and previous posts on this car, that whole channel right around the inner wheelhouse was really rusted out. The trunk floor in those areas were really bad, and the rest of the car wasn't bad at all. So once we're done with welding the whole base, the trunk floor, into the rear seat pan area and the seams on these wheelhouses, we can then go ahead and pull the quarter panels off. You can see everything's already prepped out with the door jambs, with the weld through primer, the bottom rocker area, and we also did have weld through primer on the whole entire wheelhouses. That was to stop them from rusting. We will, once we're done welding this inner part of the structure of the wheelhouse, come back through, DA sand that whole area, and then epoxy primer, so we'll get it down to bare metal. The weld through primer on the wheelhouse is one, to keep the weld on there on areas that we are going to weld and not burn through, and then two, stop the whole part from completely surface rusting, because these wheelhouses have been in this car now a few weeks at this point, to say the least, after they've been sandblasted. And really, when we pull stuff out of our sandblast cabinet, it only has a few days, depending on humidity and temperature, on when it does start rusting. So putting it in the weld through primer really makes it easier. It is a little bit of waste. Like I said, we'll come back through with the DA sander anywhere except the lip then, and then weld up the areas. Before we do put these parts in weld through primer, we are going to also do the same thing with the trunk drop off. You can see they just came out of the sandblast cabinet. We'll go ahead and install them, because this spot behind the trunk drop off, we will put epoxy primer on that area also. That will it'll match the trunk. It'll keep everything sealed up on an area that water does, water could get in there, stuff does fall in this area, and you see these rotted out a lot of times for that reason. So what we'll end up doing, we just kind of screw everything in place. We'll get both of them fit up. Now I know where these went. I made some marks. I made my screw holes. Again, these were test fit on when the quarter panels were in the car, so I know exactly where they're going to be, and that makes it easier now that we can go ahead and weld them completely to the wheelhouse, and then we can weld them to the tail panel, and then weld the lip right along the bottom trunk seam. There is also weld through primer on the back side of these trunk drop-offs. We'll add the weld through primer on this front side where the quarter panel meets it right before the epoxy primer time. There's no sense in doing it right now when we're going to be working on it and have a chance of scratching it. So we do like to add the weld through primer last minute and then seal it all up, tape it off right before epoxy primer. Like I said, we are going to use the spot welder in areas that we know it's going to fit. These trunk drop-offs are one area that we know it will fit through the whole way, and we're going to continue it right into the wheelhouse. I will come back through and MIG up the rosette holes that were left over from removing the last trunk drop off. So that whole both trunk drop offs were MIG welded and spot welded, and then the MIG welds were ground down. So turning our attention on installing the quarter panels itself, you can see these are really long quarter panels. It's a hard one to install, and just make sure you're not going to damage the quarter panel. They like to twist and everything else. I left the bracket, the B-pillar support window bracket on the back. I just moved that, bent that down a little bit, and we'll bend that back up. You can remove those and install them after the quarter panel gets removed on the car, but to us, this was able to get in there. I did with these quarter panels. You could see I initially just clamped them on the front drip rails coming down. That's going to hold the quarter panel in place, and then once I'm happy with my door jamb area, I'm setting it obviously off the door itself. We can go ahead and screw them in on the door jamb, make sure that's set up, and then what I'll end up doing, I cut it out, but I went inside where the rear window would be, and I screwed down that area right there. That's where all the GM cars are welded in there. So I screwed that area down, and now I'm working my way right up the wheelhouse. What I'm also doing, I'm making sure, you can see with my hands, that nothing's over clamped, especially with these quarter panels. If you have a smaller car like a Cuda or some of the Novas that, the quarter panels are a lot shorter and they're a lot more rigid, you don't have to worry about the quarter panel trying to warp or buckle in slightly. I say buckle in, we're talking about just a wave. So what I'm doing with these quarter panels as we're installing it, we're just clamping every few, 4 inches or so, 3-4 inches with some vice grips, and we're feeling the quarter panel to make sure we're not pulling it in too far on the wheelhouse, being that these quarter panels really, they don't have anything to hold the length of their shape. So if you pull one area in, it's going to pull the whole quarter panel in on that whole flat side panel of this Monte Carlo. On the driver's side installation, it's the same mirror effect on the passenger side. That same thing, just aligning the door jamb up. I'm really also trying to line that bottom rocker going into the wheelhouse. Everything there has to be smooth, flush, and pulled down. That's the thing about these GM cars. We really want to get them pulled down and tight against a rocker panel. So once I'm happy with that, we go ahead, both quarter panels are on the car. This car, we can go ahead and install the deck filler panel. This should set the width of the quarter panel. As you can see, I just have the clamps on the front drip rails, and I don't have anything on the back window channels yet. So I'm going to pull both quarter panels in. We have vice grips underneath where we're pulling them into the deck filler panel. That's going to set the width of it. Then you could see I already put the vice grips working our way up the back window channel, and then we aligned it with the roof that we kept on the car. So the factory roof, we worried about the curvature there. Everything looks good. I also did butt weld the seams on the quarter panels to the roof panel, because these quarter panels are supposed to sit under the roof. Since we're not going to do that, we'll just butt weld that seam up completely, and no one will know the difference. with these quarter panels, what makes them a little bit more challenging than a lot of other cars we do are these end caps. This is one of the GM cars that's got the end caps, and really you need to sit there and test fit the end caps, because we even have two sets of end caps. You can see we have these maroon ones, and you'll see later we have a gray set that's going to be at the end of this video. The owner did give me both end cap sets that he's collected over time, and it's really good to have a bunch of parts to be able to choose from, because we can go ahead, and what I ended up doing, you could see we're test fitting the black cherry ones, we're adjusting the quarters, and then I went through, I put the gray ones back on there, start test fitting and adjusting on them, and then really we just settled up on the set, which ended up being the gray ones, that they just profiled better to the quarter panels with less work. So like I said, you'll see a lot more fitting of these maroon ones. I did do most of the work on there because these were the original end caps, so I was really trying to keep them with the car. But in the grand scheme of things, like I said, you just got to go with whatever parts are going to fit the best. The owner gave us this option, so we're just trying to build the best car we can. With all these parts, there are variances in factory parts too. Both of these are original Monte Carlo pot metal caps, and like I said, one definitely fit better than the other. You can see we still have the maroon ones on here. We're just going to mess with the trunk at this point. This trunk was the same thing because of the tail panel and everything, or it fatigued over time. The trunk was trying to arch out a lot more than the curvature of the end caps and tail panels, and normally I would say it's the tail panel issue since we mess with the tail panel so much, but these end caps right now, they're setting the curvature going into the tail panel. So like I said, I don't know if the trunk was just fatigued over time. I've seen it on other stampings where new aftermarket parts, where the parts get lazy on the stampings, which this obviously wasn't the case. I just think over time the metal wore out, the lip got removed from the bottom, and it starts separating and backing off over time. So what we're going to do, we're just taking a slapper and we're just reshaping the trunk, bringing it down. We're going to go ahead and re-weld the bottom lip of this trunk to just hold everything in place. Again, this is one of the reasons why I like to test fit all the parts on this car. It just goes back to the same thing with the end caps, same thing with the trunk, that whatever parts get fit on this car, I like to put them on and fit the car for the parts that are going to be final. That I've always said that I've had owners say, oh yeah, I want to put a rusted set of fenders on the car from mock-up, and I'll find a set of fenders down the road. Same thing with a hood, all that stuff. I really, in this shop, like to have the parts that are going to go on the car because of all the factory variances and differences in it. Same thing if the owner puts another trunk on this car or something like that and it doesn't fit, or it fits better because this one was warped out. It's just one of those things that I know I can give the car back and all the sheet metal fits bumper to bumper, and that's what we're doing. Same thing with the rear bumper. You'll see at the end of the video, we are going to test fit the rear bumper. We're going to adjust on the rear bumper down the road in the gapping phase and really just get everything on this car where the owner can take it to a paint and body shop and know exactly what he has with no filler and everything else, and see whatever small things still need to be tweaked and what things he likes and they are good to go. Now that I'm happy with the final fitment of everything, you can see now the gray pot metal end caps are on the car, so I am going to do the final welding. You could see we started with the door jamb. We followed the same way we were clamping the car. Then I welded the inside of the quarter panel to the rocker. Now we're going to take the spot welder out and we're going to go right around the whole wheelhouse. You could see with the spot welder, it's even easier to add so many more welds than the factory would have done. I'm also taking the spot welder right back up the rear of the quarter panel, and I'm going to follow up the end cap. That's where we're going to remove the end cap, and I'll follow in welding the end cap tail panel area. Same thing on this side. You can see we are going to start with the inner jamb of this car. We did weld up the old holes that we drilled out on the inner jamb, clean them up, ground them out, and we're going to spot weld them. This is something that you'll see, it'll look more like the factory. I mean, there's seals and rubbers that go over it anyway. With the door jamb too, where we get the spot welder everywhere we can in there, but you could see we also did drill our MIG rosette holes to weld them. Once we're done welding the door jamb and the whole bottom of the car. We went to the end cap. Like I said, we're going to turn our attention back to the top window corner, and we're going to start using the spot welder back down the whole window seam and everything else like that. Once we're done with that, well, like I said, we can turn our attention to the rear of the car. I also do have the top roof line to quarter panels already welded in place. They're completely I tack welded them first, then we welded the seam completely. We'll grind them down, so really when it's all said and done, it won't even look like anyone messed with that area, because we just butt the quarter panel up top against the old quarter panel. What we're doing on these end caps, like I said, they are screwed in place obviously where they couldn't move when we unbolted the end cap. We took the spot welder, went through the whole area, so it's spot welded everywhere that the quarter panel was, on the end cap, and nothing moved. Then we could come back through, remove the screws everywhere, and then MIG weld up those screw holes. Now we'll turn our attention to the deck filler panel. Same thing. Same spot welder attachment and everything. We'll just put that on the deck filler panel, start in the middle, we'll work our way to one side, then we'll turn it around, work our way to the other side. We're going to change the attachment to get inside the trunk gutters, and we'll use this attachment all the way around the top of the deck filler panel, and then we'll install the trunk gutters, which will follow the same process. With the trunk gutters, you could see they were test fit on the car, but they weren't welded in place until now. The reason being is they're not really affecting any kind of gaps or anything. It's just the seals. As long as the gaps on the quarter panels in the trunk were okay, these trunk gutters will fit with no issues. We did do some trimming because on this Monte Carlo, we did keep some of the rear trunk gutter area from the factory. These are just parts that they don't make full trunk gutter sets for this car. So we're picking and choosing where we're going to go. And like I said, we didn't want to disrupt the tail panel anymore. We did just set the curvature right there. I set the curvature a little bit more just to make sure the trunk seal is tight on this car. We will end up fitting the trunk seal before we do the final gapping on the trunk itself and everything, just to make sure heights in the tail panel, everything's set. You can see these corner caps looking down this car. They fit very nice on this car. Every body line lines up. We did have to do some pull prying on them just to make sure everything matches. But in general, I'm very happy with it. They will need, obviously, this whole car will need a little bit of body work. I'm not saying it's perfect. When you see this car at the very end, you'll see it'll have no filler on it, and that's the main thing. I want to show the owners what we have with no filler on the car. Obviously, it's not completely, metal finished out, but in general, the car is very straight. You could see right now, we are going to strip all the E-coat off this car, and we are going to expose the whole quarter panel to bare metal and just make sure everything is good. It's in 2 coats of epoxy primer over bare metal that will match the rest of the car, and sealed up to get ready for the body shop when it leaves this shop. We still have a lot more work to do on this, but this will make it where once we put the epoxy primer on this car, we don't have to worry about anything on these quarter panels. It could sit there for years if it really had to. Everything's sealed up. It could get wet if it had to. Everything on it will be an epoxy primer. So you can see right now we are removing them. The quarter panels are straight. There's no issues on them. It's so cool seeing these cars in the bare metal, especially a car like this on the long sweeping quarter panels. I posted some photos on Facebook on it, and it really, at all different angles, really drew the attention. So it's so exciting to see, such a long quarter panel in bare metal. You can also see the seam butt weld I did in the top lead joint. That area is finished out and going to be sealed in epoxy primer. The roof already was in epoxy primer from when we did the initial sandblasting and the stripping on the car. So what I'm doing right now, I'm adding the window trim clips with the Pro Spot. We have these clips that, we can actually weld them on like the factory does with the spot welder with the stud. So we could sit there, and I have the factory locations of this car. I've have them pre-marked with a little marker spot, and then we'll go ahead spot weld them. Once we're done with all the trim clips and everything else. We'll go ahead and get this car in epoxy primer, we'll get it sealed up, and we'll wrap up this video for some final thoughts.
All right, we'll go ahead and wrap up this video on the 70 Monte Carlo with the rear sheet metal, the trunk, the quarter panels, the wheel houses, and the trunk drop-offs with the extensions. And you could see I also have the bumper on the car. So saying that, I did do a little bit of work off camera, just dialing everything in. We've been rock and rolling on it. What I've done, I did start some of the gap in process. You could see I adjusted the front fenders in a little bit, and the reason I really started this gap in process before showing you the walk around was that lower corner of the door on that side. That side was really bad from when the fender stuck out, so we had to grind on the bottom of the fender, bring it in a little bit. And what we also did, we were pulling and prying on it, and that corner of that door, the patch I did on the other side, it was just off, because when I built the patch on the door, the fenders weren't on the car, the doors weren't even on the car, and there was nothing left of that corner of the door. So I did rebuild that whole structure. And what else I did find out on that side, we just had the profile, the curvature of the fender itself was off, just because so little was left of that door. So I cut a bunch of that off, readjusted it, and built it actually on the car, and I think it looks so much better now. We did go through, clean up some of the edges on that, and we did gap and profile that side. Everything over there looks really good. The gaps are pretty dialed in. We're going to fine tune it a little bit more with a file, just to clean everything up and file everything straight. We're going to do the same thing on this side, but looking around on this side too, the gaps look pretty tight. They're pretty well adjusted. The body lines too. Everything's following the line straight across. All our body lines looking down the car in general match really good. The profiling of the fenders to the doors to the quarter panels on both sides really is looking very well. So in general, the gapping's almost done on the doors. Like I said, some fine tuning. We don't have the door latches in the car yet. Usually if you watch other videos of mine, we always put the door latches in the car, and that's how we use the slide hammer and fine tune, some of the profile issues, and we're still going to do that. The latches right now are still soaking in a bunch of acid, and then we had them in lacquer thinner. We're trying to get them where the rust is out of them. We're trying to clean them up and get them working really well and freely. So they'll be sitting for another week or so in there, a couple days and different things, just to clean them up. Now with the quarter panels, you saw we did strip them all the way down. Another reason usually I don't do the epoxy on the quarter panels, these were just so rusted, kind of like the front fenders here you saw. So we decided to go ahead and, before it rusts, just strip everything that was bare metal and epoxy it. I already knew I wasn't going to cut on these quarter panels, so it wasn't going to affect us with the gap and phase up here. We will come back through, finish cleaning up these doors when we do the front end, and put all them in a fresh coat of epoxy. Everything with the wheel houses, walk around this car, is welded in. The quarter panels, you saw we also put the sound deadener on them, and it really makes a big difference. If you heard this car beforehand, it just droned so bad. It was, like I said, I am a big fan of the sound deadener. We are using it all the time. With the trunk, we still have not gapped the trunk. I am waiting for the trunk seal in this car, but we did get everything for the most part. The lines are straight. It gets a little bit tight down here on this trunk extension piece. Now, saying that, how everything fits up with the bumper, the trunk extension, the trunk itself, it's really one of those, we're trying to just make everything a compromise. We will end up probably grinding the trunk where it gets a little bit tight over here in the future. We'll probably end up doing that off camera, but long ways up here in the trunk, it looks really well. The profile on the trunk where everything matches up top, we added more curvature to the trunk off camera, and you saw this whole back of the trunk on the camera, it really was just sticking out way too far. Now looking at this car, I will say it looks like this whole area here is sticking out pretty far too on the bumper. There might be another issue where the car was hit. I need to talk to the owner. We need to get the trim that comes down here and see how it looks on this car. These are just the fine tuning stuff that, you know, when you can't buy brand new parts and we have to hand build stuff and a car was in a wreck, we have nothing to really go off of. This is where we need to just dial in everything and really triple check it. So like I said, we're going to get the trim on the bottom that goes on this whole area first. We're going to get the trunk seal in this car. I am happy with the way this side lines up on the trunk. We do have some fine tune adjustments. The other thing on the trunk, and again, we're waiting on trunk seal, is we look good on this side with our gapping, and we get a little bit wide over here. So that's something else we will address in the future. And also the bumper is not 100% set where it is. So we are gonna fine tune and play with that, because I already can tell I wanna twist it down this way a little bit. There is some fine tuning stuff on the bumper. Again, what I'll do, I'm gonna do a lot of this off camera. We'll come back through on the next video, and it might be the final wrap up on this car and the final assembly. We'll see. I mean, this car really is starting to come together. Everything's looking pretty decent compared to how it, you know, first arrived. Obviously saying there is some more fine tuning stuff we're going to do. We do want to pull it off the frame fixture. We also need to pull this car's frame off the body and sandblast, clean that up. And then, like I said, we are going to do the front fenders, completely strip them down and everything else. There's a bunch of rust, just like it was on the rear quarter panels, just from them sitting around and the owner having these parts for so long. But looking at this car, it's looking like a Monte Carlo. I'm real happy with it. Like I said, inside the trunk, all that's also been epoxy primed, cleaned up. We did finish the trunk, you know, hinges and all that. So like I said, everything's pretty much dialed in on this car. The trunk gutters were also sealed up in that area. Stay tuned for the next video. It's gonna be a little bit, because like I said, we are gonna do a lot of stuff off camera on this car, and the next video more than likely just might be a wrap-up video of the car, being that, you know, just filming all the fine-tuned stuff. And like I said, when we're custom making the tail panel or something, or moving it out, whatever we're gonna do, we'll probably just do a wrap-up with some pictures like we did on some of the off-camera stuff on this car. So stay tuned for that. Check out our Facebook page. We got 3 new builds in the shop since last time we put out a video, I think it was, or 2 more. We have a lot going on that we're not filming. We are posting them on Facebook, Carthage Classic Cars, so check them out. Follow us on that, and like, comment, subscribe to this video and the channel. It really does help us out. We are going to put something else. We're going to, you know, we're doing the Charger behind us. We're in the test fitting phase of that car, so we're just dialing in the sheet metal. So we're still filming on that car. When new kind of cars that are super interesting come in, we'll start filming them. I'm trying not to do the same old stuff over and over again and just be very repetitive on that. But stay tuned. The shop's always busy. Like I said, we got a lot going on here. I'm Rick from Carthage Classic Cars, and we'll see you on the next video.